Hi, I'm Tristan, and this is Thinking About Politics. So today, oh boy, we are yet again going to provide some evidence that allegations of fraud in the 2020 election made by Donald Trump and certain Republicans are utterly without merit. And we're going to do this by, again, focusing in on what's happening in Arizona. We've done a bunch of videos on this, but if you haven't been following along, after Republicans voted along party lines to authorize another audit of the election, this would be the fourth one, they hired a company that had never run an election audit before. And to top it all off, was run by a guy who had been putting forward Donald Trump's conspiracy theories on social media, claiming that Donald Trump had actually won the election, things of that nature. And whatever you think, you have to admit that this does not have the appearance of neutrality. One political party hires a company that doesn't do election audits but is run by a political hack. But that doesn't look good. If the shoe were on the other foot, you'd probably have some problems with it if you don't have problems now. Well, anyway, after months of delay, they have finally released their audit report. And, boy, is it bad. Like, objectively bad. And no, this discussion probably isn't going to convince a committed partisan of anything. But if you have questions about what happened in 2020, or you're in any way confused by all the disinformation that's been flying around, this video is for you. Trump and his folks are lying about election fraud in 2020. And you can check the receipts for yourself. And here's just some of the stuff that we've already covered. The fact that this fake audit or fraudit, authorized by Republicans in the Arizona Senate, fails to follow auditing standards to ensure reliable and unadulterated results. The effort here was funded by dark money and right-wing conspiracy nuts. It was not funded by a neutral source like the state. And there was not one, not two, but three independent audits and recounts of this election before this fraudit effort got underway. None of these reviews found any evidence of error or fraud, and all of them concluded that the count was accurate and the voting machines were not hacked and weren't connected to the internet. To top it all off, the attorneys who had forwarded Trump's fraudulent claims of election fraud are actually right now getting slapped around in federal court for lying and being disbarred from the practice of law in certain states. So, I mean, if you were going to trust anything the Cyber Ninjas report had to say, why? Whatever. You don't have to answer that. That's between you and God. But they did produce an awful report. And we went ahead and read all 3 volumes of that stinker. And I, as somebody who spends a lot of time analyzing documents, just have a few things I want to point out for you to consider about this report. And I'll let you know up front that my ultimate conclusion here is that you cannot trust anything this report has to say. Knowing the background and reading the full text now, this is a slipshod effort by political hacks and rank amateurs. The findings here are of no practical use whatsoever. And hey, that's a strong claim. It requires strong evidence. I have it. Allow me to present it to you. I am ready to put up a fight here. But before I do, if you're into serious political discussion that tries to be intellectually honest and rigorous, please go ahead, give us a like or a subscribe. That'd be mighty nice. Agree or disagree, I hope we can make a compelling argument for you to consider. First, what was the purpose of this audit? Well, without reading the audit report itself, listening to what Donald Trump has said and other Republicans, you'd be forgiven if you thought that the purpose of this audit was to overturn the 2020 presidential election. The stated purpose of this report, as it says quite clearly, is to figure out places where they could recommend legislation to tighten up the election process and to try to make people more confident in the security of elections. But can we be honest here? If it weren't for the drumbeat of folks like Donald Trump and his Republican allies, folks like Representative Gosar in the state, other folks who conspired with January 6 rioters, if these folks were not saying that Donald Trump was going to come back to office, that this audit would show tremendous fraud, and that this was going to allow Joe Biden to be thrown out, if that weren't the case, would this audit really have happened? Would there really be any reason not to trust the 3 audits that had already occurred? I think not. I don't think the purpose of trying to figure out legislation is compelling. I don't think this would have been approved absent that sort of outside political force. But hey, reasonable minds can disagree. I'm not going to try to prove it one way or another right now, but that's my hunch. This would not have been approved were it not for the big lie that Donald Trump somehow won the election. Now, if you look at the executive summary of Volume 1, it reads like a kid's book report who never read the book and starts by quoting the dictionary or something. These folks start by quoting the preamble to the Constitution of the United States. And then they say that, quote, nothing is more essential in preserving liberty than free and fair elections. And while that sounds really nice, it's kind of cringy. And besides that, it's wrong. I mean, if you can elect a dictator in a fair election, is that really what's most essential in preserving liberty? I mean, think about how Napoleon became emperor through a plebiscite. That's an election. I'd say nothing's more central to a democratic republic than people's acceptance of democratic norms and social equality. Once we start thinking that our group or we are better than everybody else and everyone else deserves nothing but contempt, we're in trouble. So with this clumsy opening out of the way, we finally get to the point around sentence 3. Quote, Cyber Ninjas was engaged by the Arizona Senate to audit the 2020 general election and determine in what areas legislative reform may enhance our current process so that our elections may continue to get better, becoming more perfect. And then they say, straight away, there was no substantial differences between the hand count of ballots provided and the official election canvass results for Maricopa County. There is no reliable evidence that the paper ballots were altered to any material degree. So, they found no fraud. No fraud. We done? Nope. We get to their findings, and some of them are kind of oddly worded and don't make a lot of sense. For instance, none of the various systems related to elections had numbers that would balance and agree with each other. In some cases, these differences were significant. Now, what do you suppose systems related to elections are? Whatever they are, they had numbers. Phone numbers, lottery numbers. What are we talking about here? And whatever these systems are, whatever these numbers might be, none of them had numbers that would balance and agree with each other. So the numbers didn't match. Were they supposed to? What in the HE double hockey sticks is going on here? What are you talking about? We're just going to have to keep going because they don't give us any answers here. Finding number 2, there appears to be many 27,807 ballots cast from individuals who had moved prior to the election. So there might be a typo here, and I'm not sure whether it means to say that there appears to be as many as 27,807 ballots, meaning they're unsure of the exact total, but the max number would be that 27,807? Or do they mean that there are many ballots in this group and 27,807 is the exact number? It's such a weird error. But that's not even the big issue I have here. They're saying that there appears to be 27,807 ballots in this group. Well, why does it appear that way? This means you're not sure whether there's actually 27,807 ballots in this group, or does it just appear that way because you're inexperienced with elections and inexperienced with election audits? Again, no answers are provided. Finding 3, files were missing from the election management system, EMS server. Files? What files? Ballots? Images? Was it solitaire? Can you be any less specific? It seems like if you wanted people to know what you found in your audit here, you would tell them as clearly as possible. But finding number 4, ballot images. 284,412 on EMS were corrupted or missing. I just want to stress this is what the actual report says. I can't tell if it just wasn't proofread or if a computer wrote this thing or what. But I have no idea what this means. Were they corrupted or were they missing? I don't get it. And what would that mean anyway? The only thing that makes me hesitate from saying that this lack of clarity is intentional is the old adage that you should not ascribe malice to where incompetence would explain the actions just perfectly. And incompetent is just one of the words you might use here to describe the Cyber Ninjas. The final 4 findings we're just kind of skip. They mainly deal with perceived deficiencies in the county's cybersecurity posture. I'd wager that Cyber Ninjas had gotten these wrong too, but we're not even going to interest them because, and this is key now, there is no allegation of fraud in any of them. In my opinion, the last 4 findings viewed in the most positive light, and there's absolutely no reason to give these people that kind of deference here. All they amount to is, you didn't lock your front door. Follow me. It might be true that I didn't lock my front door, but if I call the police up and tell them that I didn't lock my door, so I want them to sweep for prints in case somebody stole something, I'm going to get locked up unless there's some sort of evidence things have gone missing and there's some reason to take up their time. I mean, unless something's stolen or gone missing or there's signs of entry, calling the police and demanding an investigation is silly. And that's what you silly Trump supporters have gone and done, at the request of a billionaire, no less, who inherited his money. It's disgraceful. Now, in the third volume of this report, we find a table of different findings. Not the ones we just read, and the numbers of implicated ballots. So this is pretty interesting. There are 3 findings listed as severe or high severity level, and these are the issues that affect the largest number of ballots. At the severe level, we have mail-in ballots voted from prior address, 23,244 ballots. At the high level, more ballots returned by voter than received, 9,041 ballots. Also at the high level, voters that potentially voted in multiple counties. Wowza! Does that mean there are some 35,000 ballots that were cast fraudulently? If I was convinced by lying politicians that 2020 had been stolen, I'd probably read this that way, wouldn't I? But it's not really what the report says, is it? And maybe you can be forgiven for falling in with a fast-talking politician on this one. This report is tremendously unclear. But when you take the time to read through it, the thing is, the truth of the matter is here. Let's take the first one, the 23,000 voters who voted from a different address. So if you read this report further on, you can find out that what they're saying is they've identified 23,244 times where 5 things all occurred. 1, a mail-in ballot was sent to a voter at an address. 2, the voter no longer lived at that address. 3, no one with the same last name lived at that address any longer. 4, the mail was not auto-forwarded. 5, the ballot was cast. That might sound mighty suspicious until you think, like, wait, my mom and my stepdad have a different last name than me. So if my ballot got sent to them because I moved out recently and they gave it to me over dinner, I'm in that group. What's more, they're determining whether or not somebody lived at an address by cross-referencing it with a commercially available database. And I mean, it's the type of thing telemarketers use all the time. There's a lot of bad information in those things. Ever have a dead relative you get phone calls for? So if the database was just wrong about your address, as they often are, you're in that pile too. It is quite possible, according to the report, according to the plain language of the report, that the actual number of ballots in this group was 0. The way they've reported this finding is completely deceptive. Oh yeah, and then they go on to recommend that the state pass a law that already exists. And they do not recommend that the election be thrown out, by the by. Next, more ballots returned by voter than received. I've read this one very slowly and I can't quite understand what it's getting at. They say that 9,014 more ballots show as returned in the EV33 early voting return file for a single voter who voted by mail than show as sent to that individual within the EV32 early voting sent file. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but it later clarifies in a note. An EV33 indicates that a ballot is received and does not necessarily mean a ballot was counted. So they're kind of implying that 9,014 people tried to vote twice, even though, as the report notes, it is assumed only the first ballot received and validated was counted. And their grand conclusion here, further investigation would be needed to determine the cause. So they don't have a finding here. They can't figure out what this discrepancy is. However, Maricopa County stated itself in their brief response, and CyberNinjas all but admits in this report, that the 9,041 number relates to people legally curing defective early voting ballots. They're entitled to do that legally. There's no evidence of double voting. Now let's address the claim that there are 5,047 voters who cast votes in multiple counties in Arizona. Why do they think this? But they don't. They're just trying to stir up political discord. But what they're saying is that they used their commercial database and ran through it and found 5,014 pairs of people who have the same name, date of birth. And is this some crazy coincidence? Like, not even. As CyberNinjas states in their reports, the incidence here, roughly 1/3 of 1%, may be the rate of commonalities in identifying information between legitimate, separate individual voters, especially with common last names. The problem here is that the old CyberNinjas failed to cross-reference like a meaningful piece of data like social security number or driver's license ID or something like that. But again, there's like no evidence of double voting whatsoever. So why is CyberNinjas putting out this patently deceptive report? Why are some Republicans saying that it proves claims of voter fraud? Well, that's simple. It isn't because there's evidence of voter fraud. There isn't any evidence of voter fraud. What they're saying simply is not true. But they don't care about the truth. They care about getting into power. And they care about getting some people so angry and so fired up, they go and do things like this. At the end of the day, there has been no evidence of voter fraud in Arizona or any other state in the 2020 election. If you're still saying there was, I have to conclude you're either a liar, lied to, or maybe not too bright. And I'm always going to assume you're that middle group until you prove me otherwise. There's no issue that could have affected the election here. There's no indication of voter fraud. Listen, it's time to stop arguing with people about this. The truth is pretty clear. It's like arguing with flat earthers. There's no why. We know what's going on. You know what's going on. Please help spread the truth. Share this video with someone who's maybe a little confused about what happened in Arizona. Share this video with folks who actually say that Donald Trump won the election, or that this Cyber Ninjas report shows that there's tremendous amounts of fraud. Clearly there's not. And there's just no two ways about it. Anyway, that's going to be it for me. You've been great. I really hope to see you again, but until next time, keep thinking. To kiss you now, I'm busy with this mule. Oh, my cat's attacking. But, okay, that's my lighting. Ah.